Back to order. Welcome to the Princeton Council meeting of December 3rd, 2018. And please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we're going to start with the approval of minutes from our meeting of September 24th, 2018. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Howard. Any corrections or comments on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes pass. Next we come to announcements, and I'll start on my right with Mr. Cohen. Any announcements?
I don't have any announcements tonight.
Ms. Howard? Mr. Lindman? Ms. Cromiller? No announcements?
No announcements?
Oh, no. All right, I have announcements, but my computer's, I was so fast, my computer's not turned on yet. All right, give me 1 second here. Okay, so first announcement is we will be back in this building tomorrow night starting at 7 p.m. for the second of our goal setting meetings for the end of this year. So this is our goal setting for 2019. The meeting will be in the community room, which is the first meeting off of the parking lot. And the subject for tomorrow night's goal setting meetings are two of our strategic priorities. One of them is sustainability and wellness, and the other is social justice and inclusion. So we welcome you all back for that. And then the following Tuesday on December 11th, we'll be having our final goal setting meeting, and this one will be focused on user-friendly government. And both of those start at 7, and both will be in the community room here at Witherspoon Hall. Also wanted to remind everybody that there will be a special election on Tuesday, December 11th. This is for the school bond referendum. And wanted to remind everybody that this will be, most people vote in a different polling location than they're used to. There are only going to be 4 polling locations for this election. And so you should have received a sample ballot in the mail. You should check that sample ballot to make sure you know where to go. And we'll also be posting something on the website. If it's not up there right now, it'll be there towards the end of this week, certainly by Monday before the election, so you can check to see where to go to vote.
Is there a database online on the state website somewhere?
There might be, but we'll include that link on our website so people can check. And then the Mercer County Clerk's Office received a grant to be part of a pilot program which they'll be rolling out as part of this election. So at one of the polling locations at Johnson Park, they will be using a new kind of voting machine that'll actually feel like an old kind of voting machine. And this is the kind of voting that many good government advocates in Princeton have been pushing for a long time. So these are machines that have a verified paper trail. So that means that as a voter, you vote on paper. And then it gets fed into the machine. So at the end of the night, in addition to the tally that the machine pops out, they'll have a stack of ballots that if there's a recount or some other need to go back, they'll be able to go through those. So we're excited this is happening in Princeton, and we're hoping this is the beginning of a return to voting technology where there's a verified paper trail. I have a few more announcements. The other is that the redevelopment process for the seminary has begun, and there's a ad hoc group that will be holding 2 neighborhood kickoff meetings. The first one will be this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And after that meeting, there will be a walking tour of the area, weather permitting. The second neighborhood meeting will be on Monday, December 10th from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And both of those meetings will be at the Erdman Center, which is at 20 Library Place and is part of the seminary property. And then 2 more quick announcements. We are looking for volunteers for our boards, committees, and commissions. There's an application online. So if you are interested in volunteering for the town, please check out the application. And you can also, when you go online, see a list of all of our boards and commissions and see where your skill set might be a good match for what our boards and commissions are. And finally, this is more of a announcement for my colleagues. The Arts Council is about to put out their application for booths at Communiversity, and I want to make sure that for our boards and committees that we let the Arts Council know that those are municipal boards and commissions that are asking for space. So if you are on a board or commission that normally has a booth, please, if you could let me know before you submit the application so we can make sure they're flagged for the Arts Council. That would be great. And I'll turn it over to staff. Ms. Stockton?
Just one announcement. On Wednesday, December 19th, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., the State of New Jersey Department of Transportation, as well as Mercer County, will be hosting a public information center at our Monument Hall building for the Alexander Street project. This will be, the state will be replacing the bridge over the DNR Canal, and Mercer County will be replacing 2 bridge structures immediately north of the DNR Canal Bridge. The work is set to take place starting next year, with the state project starting in the summer. So that's a public information center from 6 to 8. Staff from both the state and from Mercer County will be available to talk about the project, to talk about detours and other impacts, as well as all of the improvements that will be coming as a result of this project. Yes, sir.
Question, Deanna. Could you just tell what the timeline, the time frame is going to be for these improvements so we can get the word out early and often for the public?
It's estimated that because we do have the 2 entities working out there, I think the idea is the project will start in the summer of 2019 and will be completed by both entities right around May of 2020.
Thank you. Are there any other staff announcements? No? Okay. Then we will move on to comments from the public for items that are not already on the agenda. And we'll start with the sign-up sheet that was on the podium. And we'll start with Susan Danoff. I think the mic's on, but you might need to get close to it.
No.
Just have to be very close to it.
Now can you hear me? Okay. My name is Susan Danoff. I'm a resident of 116 Clover Lane. I've been living at that address and paying my taxes for 22 years. When we moved into that house, there was somewhat of a water problem. We're at a low point. And one of the things we found was that water pooled on Clover Lane, and it was dangerous. And they called it Lake Hearn for the people who used to live there. And Mr. Kaiser came out and said, this is dangerous. He put in a storm sewer. We also put in new pipes. We found there were pipes under the ground. We put in new pipes, and we regraded the property because we found that water was coming towards a one-room addition. That was very early that was in the 1990s. Several years ago, a house was built behind us at 223 Snowden Lane. The house that sat there prior was 1,424 square feet. The house that was built several years ago is 4,021 square feet, not counting the large 2-car garage. All of the water from that house, the gutters and the sump pumps, is now draining into our yard. I've done a little bit of research. The only thing that was required at the time was one dry well, which is on one far corner of that property. I was sure when this water started draining into our property that there must have been a mistake, that the builders must have done something wrong, and the first thing I did was I called the man who had excavated our property the first time, and I said, I don't know what all this water is, what's all this water doing here, what can I do? He said, call Princeton, this is a problem of Princeton. So I called the engineering department. Don Mayor Brown came out. We were walking in 2 inches of water out in my yard. I have a very large yard. And he agreed to investigate the problem. At the time, there was a leak in the water main in front of that house. That was fixed. The problem continued. I called Mr. Brown again. He came out again. He came out the next year again. The worst time is in the spring when everything melts. But I can tell you that I wear rubber boots on my property all year round except in a drought. Mr. Brown came out again last spring, and he said he would look into what the neighbors had. He would let me know. He didn't let me know. I called him back, and he said, I'm waiting to hear from my supervisor. I'll let you know. And finally, after waiting 2 years, I said, I'll call your supervisor. At which time in March, this past March, I contacted Ms. Stockton. In March, she returned my call 2 months later after many, many tries. Then she came out with Mr. West. They looked at the property, said they would see what they could do. And I remember it was my birthday on July 20th. I went to see the mayor at her office hour at the library and said, I don't know what to do about this. And I have had no response from Ms. Stockton. And that day I had an email from Ms. Stockton saying, well, you've always had this problem, it's your problem. And I said, yes, but I went to see her. I said, I have not been complaining about this problem for 22 years. I've been complaining about this problem for 2 years since the house behind was built. And she agreed that that was true and said she would investigate, but I still haven't heard anything from her. In the spring, in March, during the snowstorm that you'll remember where we had a lot of rain and then a very heavy snow, I lost several trees. One of the trees, 2 of the trees cracked. They were caused by the snow. But one of the trees toppled over due to the amount of water underneath that tree. There was a pond under that tree, and the roots were all curled up, and that tree fell on my car, destroyed my car. If it had fallen on my house, it would have destroyed my house. And probably, maybe somebody would have died in that time. We were lucky that it did not.
Hold on.
Excuse
Sorry
me.
to interrupt.
I just wanted to comment, if you don't mind, Mayor. I've heard of the situation. If it's possible, I know that you have some difficulties on your properties. I would like to take the opportunity. It's probably a complicated matter, and I know you've spent a lot of time with it. If we can sit down and have a conversation and go into more detail of what the situations are, we can meet with staff and see where we can move forward, if you wouldn't mind doing that.
I would be happy to talk to you. I just want to say that I'm being victimized by the overdevelopment of a neighboring property. My property's been damaged. It's been devalued. This is a matter of fairness and equity. I understand these zoning regulations have changed in the past 2 years, and they're not retroactive, meaning, okay, take care of it yourself. That's not equitable to me. So I want to know how you can help me, and I hope that you can. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you for your comments, and council's aware. I think especially as we're seeing climate change, this is an issue that's happening in a lot of areas of town. So, no, we passed an ordinance for stricter stormwater regulations, and we're continuing to work on the problem. But we can only move so fast, and we understand the issues that you've had, and we're going to try to do everything we can. Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. All right, next I'd like to call up Young Cho.
Hi. So the concern I have is about the stop sign, or actually the lack thereof, on the corner of Prospect and Riverside. So that's right in front of Riverside Elementary School. So as it stands, and I spoke to one of the police officers, and he wasn't sure whether the traffic signages were controlled by the city or the state, or what entity, what municipal entity. So this may actually have nothing to do with Princeton per se. But in any case, right now, as many of you may know, Prospect, when you're coming to that four-way intersection, has stop signs, but Riverside does not. So Riverside just goes straight through. I've lived this is my 2 years in Princeton, and I live right around the corner from there on Robert Road. I've seen a few times where a person, and especially if you're somebody who is not familiar with the area, and you're driving up to that intersection on Prospect, and it's, like human error, and sometimes people are just kind of going by their intuition without necessarily thinking, and they make mistakes. They mistakenly assume that the road has a stop sign. So when you come up to that stop sign and you're kind of stopped on Prospect, and you see somebody coming down Riverside that hasn't come to the end of right to the intersection, but is approaching it, you expect that person is stopping, and now you're going through. And I've seen near accidents right on that corner. Now, I see that. I also recognize that the reason why there is not a stop sign on Riverside might actually be purposeful, that it might actually be done in order to sort of facilitate traffic on Riverside, especially during maybe pickup and drop off at Riverside Elementary School. But I think, I think there's a 98% probability that is an overestimation of the amount of traffic that Riverside would actually accumulate, just because of the nature of the pickup and the drop-off at Riverside. There's actually gaps in time between the people that are coming out of the school. You drop someone off, and that takes 30 seconds, and then the next one. It's not like there's an entire row, one after another, actually feeding onto Riverside. So I think the traffic logistical reasons why that may have been done that way, I think is overestimated greatly. And what I just want to make sure, and it's obviously in front of an elementary school. The area has a lot of kids that ride bikes on their own, and if you're a kid riding a bicycle down Riverside, and someone actually who's on Prospect that's unaware actually does what I described, I just think it's a disaster waiting to happen.
Right.
And it just concerns me, and I think I just want to make sure that somebody has thought that through and actually has made an active, concerted decision to keep it the way it is.
Thank you very much for your comment. So I think, and Ms. Carmelo, did you want to respond, or?
Well, I just wanted to let you know, one thing that I learned when I joined the council is that Princeton has a policy against four-way stop signs, and there are no four-way stop signs. So one question I have is why, do we need to improve signage, but don't most people? But anyway, so I wanted to let you know that that there.
Right, and that might.
The traffic safety committee will definitely put the.
Yeah, and the fact that there's no four-way stop signs anywhere in Princeton could be policy. I don't know. But what, I don't know what you were about to say, but I agree.
Yeah, we have a traffic safety committee, and so I feel like that's the best place
Okay.
to,
I'm
because
just
we're not
saying-
going to, we can't decide it here on
No,
council
I understand.
tonight. So you've
I'm
been
just
very
saying
eloquent, and then I'm going to have Ms. Crummeller.
Most of the time,
Yes.
it's going to
I'll-
be
I can
fine.
get back.
Yes.
But that one time that there's a tragedy, you don't want that regret. And you don't want to, you don't want an event happening that was avoidable. And I just want to, I have nothing sort of personally.
No, I think you make a
and
good point,
I'm just
and-
making
yeah,
the
no,
case
thank you
for the
very
community,
much.
That's all.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So I should call these guys.
Yeah, and then they can let you know when the next traffic safety committee will be, and we can put it on the agenda for that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, I'd like to call up Nate Howard.
I guess it's a 21st century thing to use our phones instead of a sheet of paper. I am Nate Howard. I don't have any concerns, but I would like to take a minute to make a few positive comments. I would like to thank Councilwoman Heather Howard, also known as Nate's mom, and Councilman Lance Liverman for their service to the town of Princeton. We are all very grateful for all the work you've done to make this community more welcoming for all. Mom, I'm so proud of all you've done. Your civic service has instilled in me a love for politics, for better or for worse. I'm excited for you to be home so we can hang out. I would love to stay for the rest of this meeting, but you did tell me to finish homework. I have some gifts for Councilwoman Howard and Councilman Lance Liverman, if I may approach. Is that okay?
And our official, I guess my official last time will be December 17th, which is in, 2 weeks? But Nate couldn't make it on the 17th, so he came today. So thank you. Cut the stems first.
Okay, that's a hard act to follow, but is there anybody else who'd like to speak to anything that's not already on the agenda? Okay, so we'll then move on to reports, and we'll start with the Princeton Housing Authority, and I'd like to call up Leighton Newland. Am I calling you up too, Alvin, or just Leighton? Leighton. Okay, just Leighton, who's the chair of the Princeton Housing Authority. Welcome.
Well, I would also, hey, how you doing? Invite Alvin up should I slip or fall or make any mistakes. Feel free to help me out. First, thank you for having me represent the Princeton Housing Authority at the December meeting, 2018. Awful lot has happened this year with the Princeton Housing Authority. And I want to begin with basically saying that we are in a transition period right now. We, in late March of this year, agreed to terminate our shared services agreement with the Lakewood Housing Authority at the end of July of 2018. At approximately the same time, we also converted our public housing units to RAD, which is RAD, and it means Rental Assistance Demonstration. This, in effect, changed the Princeton Housing Authority from a public housing agency to a project-based rental assistance program. So why is this important? The Princeton Housing Authority has been in Princeton since late 1930s, when Maple Franklin was deeded over to public housing, in the early 1950s, Clay Street was done. We now have 236 units. And over all of these years, the Princeton Housing Authority and its board has basically been a maintenance organization. We have not really attempted to grow in any way. If you consider that we have 216 low-income housing units in the entire city of Princeton, that's a small number. And we are now at the point, because of changes in the United States government's rules and regulations as it pertains to entitlement programs, as I'm sure you well know, the Housing and Urban Development Agency has, over the past 10 years, continued to lessen the amount of capital funding that housing authorities receive on a yearly basis, which means that in older, dilapidated properties that are really not fit for habitation, in many ways, the funding mechanism to repair these properties is not forthcoming. And if it is, it's been dwindling on a year-by-year basis. Approximately 10 years ago, the Housing and Urban Development Agency offered a situation for housing authorities which many over the country have taken to convert to RAD. Without getting real technical, what RAD basically means is that rather than be restricted with the constrictive measures of not being able to use the land that you own to redevelop and to enter into public and private partnerships, you were unable to do so under the former situation that we found ourselves in and many housing authorities found themselves in. But under RAD, in effect, you become not so much a governmental agency, even though you are still a public housing agency, but now you have the ability to use the land that you own to redevelop your own properties. That is important in our portfolio because, as you know, most of our portfolio is old. Clay Street since the 1950s, Maple Franklin, which we've entered into a memo of understanding with the municipality and Princeton Community Housing to redevelop Maple Franklin, we are extremely indebted to and happy about, but that is only the 20 units at Maple Franklin. The fact is that the Princeton Housing Authority has its units on Clay Street, its units at Karen Court, and also its units at Spruce Circle in bad need of repair and replacement. So what we're going to do and going through this transition, being led by the Housing Authority of the City of Elizabeth since August, we have become, and I don't mean this in a bad way, shown how to be a leaner and meaner Princeton Housing Authority. On the meaner part, what that means when you convert to RAD, in that you no longer get capital subsidies on a yearly basis. So before we converted to RAD, we would get, let's say, $200,000 on a yearly basis, and we'd have to put a 5-year plan together on what, over those 5-year period, we would want to repair. It could be the roofs on Clay Street. It could be the toilets at Reading Circle or the bathrooms at Reading Circle in another 1-year plan. But those monies were geared to continue to address property devaluation and property depreciation. Well, under RAD, what you get is a high market ceiling rent based on, well, whatever the government system is based on, but you get that rent at a ceiling rent minus the 30%, and you get that on a consistent basis. And what that represents is a consistent flow of income. But with that money, you have to put monies away to do your capital expenditure and improvements. Am I okay? So we are not the same little sleepy housing authority board that could afford to sit around and let their property depreciate and not do anything about it. We have got to be more proactive with regard to how we do business with our board. So with that in mind, I want to acknowledge 3 people who have really helped us understand what it is we need to do and how we need to move forward. And that's a lady named Kathy Hart, who is the Deputy Director of the Housing Authority, City of Elizabeth Housing Authority. Her cohort, Ms. Barbara Johnson, who is the financial person at the City of Elizabeth Housing Authority, and Housing Operations Manager. His name is Michael Buckley, who is the Housing Operations Manager in the City of Elizabeth. His responsibilities has been to do the day-to-day operations for the Princeton Housing Authority. Barbara Johnson has held us down with our finances. And keep in mind that we just converted to RAD. Kathy Hart has been our deputy or executive director over this time. We had a fire in early summer, and she walked us through that. When we ended our relationship with Lakewood, 90% of our staff left or was terminated. This was a big shakeup. So now what we have is a maintenance department of 3 people. 2 were on the maintenance department before. We've added 1. And they take care of all of the turnovers for apartments. We third-partied out our landscape and greenery. All of our properties look 100% better than they've ever looked. We still have Ron Caparelli, who is our bookkeeper, who has held us down through all of our trials and turmoil. And again, Kathy Hart, Barbara Johnson, and Michael Buckley have been running the day-to-day operation. Like I said, the meaner part is because we now cannot afford, under our new organizational configuration, to have late rent payments be 10 to 15% of our yearly intake on a monthly basis. We're knocking on people's doors with the Housing Authority, City of Elizabeth, for the first time ever, I might add, and saying, excuse me, are you going to pay your rent on time this month? We need the money. Your rent is late. So I put that out there because you may hear, complaints about people who rent in public housing units because they get a phone call now because their rent is late. Not for 1 month, but chronic lateness. We, as a housing authority now, under the United States government Housing and Urban Development, can no longer afford to have a great percentage of our rents late and later because we are being asked to do the same or more with less from the federal government. And it's not going to get better. It's only going to be more challenging. So I say that to say that as we look towards a new configuration, as we look towards now terminating or ending our interim agreement with the people at the Housing Authority of the City of Elizabeth, we are going to be looking for our next best move. And what we'll be looking at is, let's say, hiring a new executive director. Well, that could be $170,000 a year, and that would be one person who might not be able to take care of the needs that we have right now. The needs we have right now is to look for an entity that will help us towards our future. And our future, quite frankly, is to redevelop not just Maple Franklin, but our entire portfolio going into the next 50 years. Keep in mind, this is where diversity and inclusivity comes in Princeton, because without the public housing authority and the low income affordability, not just where it's at now with the 236 units, but we need to expand. I don't know what the number is, but our job is now, we have put ourselves in a position, mayor and council, to be a player. Not the sleepy little housing authority that's been around for all these years, but a player in the affordable housing market. We are looking for a relationship that will take us into that future, a relationship to do our day-to-day operations, but also to look towards the redevelopment of Clay Street, of Spruce Circle, of Reading Circle, and possibly of Karen Court. I know I've already taken a long time, but let me just finish up. Capital subsidies for PHAs have been diminished consistently over the past 10 to 15 years, and many public housing agencies.
Yeah, when you lean over, you can't put the mic behind your shoulder.
Oh,
You got
okay.
to
Okay, I'm sorry. Subsidies diminished consistently over the past 10 to 15 years, and many public housing agencies have moved to project-based rental assistance programs to protect their assets and to afford agencies more flexibility to apply for tax credits and partner with outside developers in an effort to create a long-term sustainability plan for residents and units. Properties could be renovated in entirety or by site dependent upon dollars availability. The PHA has positioned itself to move forward with opportunities to improve existing structures through various rehab programs while creating more affordable housing for Princeton. The Rental Assistance Demonstration Program and the PHA successfully converted to RAD was the first step in this process. Without, spending too much more time, and I know I've taken some time, we see Spruce Circle and the Pocket Park as an opportunity to build more affordable housing. We realize that Reading Circle could also bore more affordable housing with perhaps single family on the bottom and two-room townhouses on the top. Karen Court, Princeton University, could possibly repurchase the project back and provide dollars to the PHA to reinvest in building affordable housing in other locations. University is really keen on having Karen Court back because it's right in the middle of everything they're doing. Again, Spruce Circle and the Pocket Park, Spruce would undergo rehab, have city convey park land to PHA to build affordable housing units, once again increasing units, create streetscape while eliminating Circle, increased parking, and redesigning street access for better vehicle access and emergency vehicle access for seniors. These are just a few ideas, but there's no reason why the Princeton Housing Authority can't help the municipality with regard to our fair housing obligation with building more low income and affordable housing in Princeton. And we have really, as a board, no choice but to be proactive, because to do nothing will mean that we will put ourselves out of business. We really have properties that are in bad need of rehabilitation, and we have to move in that direction. Any questions?
I just want to.
Yeah, Ms. Silverman?
Yeah. No, thank you so much. I just want to say, as someone that attends the meetings, the Princeton Housing Authority meetings, that Leighton has done an excellent job leading this board, and they have a great group. Some of the members that are here today, you have Mr. Alvin McGowan and you have Mr. Joseph Weiss. They are two members of the board, and them with Leighton and a few others, they do a great job. Some of the problems that we had earlier through the years, we've actually fixed, and some of it dealt with even having like a temporary social worker work with a few people. That was something thinking outside the box. And they've always been supportive. People have been giving extra chances many times, and some of the members that have been given extra chances have proven that it was a wise thing to do. So I want to commend Princeton Housing Authority. We deal with the low income residents, and they need our help as well as we need them in town. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a question. I just wanted to follow up on Mr. Lieberman's comment. So you had said something about how under the RAD structure, I don't know if you're still a housing authority, but whatever, Princeton Housing Authority. Are you still Princeton Housing Authority even if you're RAD?
Yes, Mayor, we are
Okay,
still Princeton
okay.
Housing Authority.
So if the Princeton Housing Authority is maybe under more pressure to make sure that you're collecting full rents from everybody, and what happens when in the past you could give those second chances that are so important? Is that something, because the way the housing is structured in
Yeah.
Princeton, you know this, often the Princeton Housing Authority is like the
Yeah.
last stop. And
I get
it's,
that.
it's, you know, it's really important that we maintain that social safety net.
I did not mean to infer that we don't give second chances. We certainly do, and we are not interested in anyone leaving the Princeton Housing Authority because of rental. But what I am saying is that sometimes in a rental situation, you have people that are consistently late with rent. And this fosters itself in the Public Housing Authority because over the past, you know, you constantly get a big shot of money, a huge shot of money in the arm at the beginning of each year to do renovations. So you really weren't under any duress. But now the federal government and the way they're treating housing authorities are making you look different at your expenditures and how you do collect your rent, because we will no longer get an infusion of cash for capital improvements. So it is incumbent upon us to maintain our flow of income to make sure that our apartments stay rented and that the monies that come from those apartments are consistent. So it's you know, we haven't thrown anybody out and we don't intend to, but when I say leaner and meaner, what I'm referring to is the fact that the federal government is asking and demanding the housing authorities operate like businesses operate. You know, this time of just continuing to, you know, allow delinquencies, just like PCH. PCH doesn't allow delinquencies. We can't afford to allow delinquencies either because we have to be accountable to keep our flow of income going. It's just a new reporting situation, but it's also a new revenue generating situation. Yes.
Leighton, this change from a regular housing authority to a RAD, does that have any impact on your mission or your focus on the low income? In other words, when you're talking about doing redevelopment and adding units, will they all be low income? Do they have to be all low income under RAD regulations?
No, under RAD, it gives you the flexibility to enter into a private public partnerships, just as any developer would. Our focus would always still be on low income. But at the same time, if you know, you don't know yet, but if you're looking at building affordable housing, we would also be looking at mixed use with commercial. You know, so we wouldn't take anything off the table, but our focus will always be low income. And to the extent that we can, we would, you know, do all low income. But it depends on low-income tax housing credits and the flow of money and financing. Sometimes in order to build projects, you have to have moderate or more market rate units. So kind of what I'm saying is we're like any other developer now. You know, our game plan is really to look at everything, but to focus on, you know, what we're doing with Maple Franklin. But the fact is that public housing is changing, and we think that we can help meet some of the numbers and obligations that Princeton has.
Thank you, Leighton, for that report. Very enlightening. If I could make a suggestion that the Civil Rights Commission has been doing a lot of work with Know Your Rights workshops in some of our public housing, and they wish to increase that going forward. I'll try to report on this at our next meeting, but it might be helpful for you to make that connection with the commission. They meet on the 18th, I think is the December meeting, because I think they'd want to know what the truth on the ground is while it'll better inform their tenants' rights workshops that they're doing if they understood both sides.
Thank you. We'll do that.
I don't want a statistical report or anything, but what are the demographics of the people living in the Princeton housing? Is it mostly elderly? Is it a range? Or can you make any generalizations, or is it just reflective of the, are the ages of the people living there reflective of the general population?
I think, Jenny, would be reflective of the general population. I know that Spruce Circle and Reading Circle are senior units, and I think that's about 80 senior units of the 236. We have 50 units on Clay Street with only no senior disabled, but family units, and also a Reading Circle. So it pretty much mirrors the population.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Now I forgot my question.
Okay. Any more questions?
I guess as you move forward, as you make this transition, I guess as you've made it, how do you see, if at all, your relationship with the municipality changing?
You know, we are, no, I don't see our relationship with the municipality changing. We are still looking for some direction on the appointments with regard to commissioners, especially from the governor's position. But as for the time being, we will remain, you know, exactly as we have been with regard to commissioners from, you know, yourself and the rest of the councilmen. But I just want to be clear. We're not, you know, changing, you know, in any great form. But the time really has come where, you know, we have properties that we really need to redevelop, and we're hoping that we can work together with the city to do that. And I think as we look at various financing options and really explore with the expertise of other people that have much greater level of expertise in this area than we do, we may be able to really help the town with its low affordable housing obligation in ways that we didn't anticipate earlier. I think it could be very exciting. And also, the last thing I want to say is that we are also committed to the best urban designs, and I think the word is neutral, zero neutral.
Carbon neutral, maybe.
What is it?
Is it carbon neutral? No.
Yeah, it's the way you build stuff that doesn't have a big carbon footprint. So whatever we do is going to be big and it's going to be beautiful. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so for our next report, we're starting to get just some preliminary signals from administration that 2019 we're going to be having one of our toughest budget years. Unfortunately, probably one of our toughest budget years since I've been mayor, since the consolidation. And, you know, we always look at every penny, but I think we're going to be looking even more so at every penny. So there was some public comment at the last meeting, and just wanted to give an update on Princeton Community TV funding, recognizing that we are in negotiations with them, so not talking about any of the negotiations, but to just get an update from Mr. DeShield as to sort of factually where we are. I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Mayor. As council is aware, in 2015, the municipality and the Princeton Community Television authorized an agreement that set aside an agreement between both that would provide, that PCTV would provide the taping of governing body meetings, planning board meetings, zoning board meetings. In exchange for that support, the municipality would provide them with a portion of our franchise fees. That began in 2015, providing $259,000. Then in 2016, the contract provided $252,000. 2017, the contract provided $242,000. And in 2018, the contract provided $232,000. As you can see, as I went through the amounts within the contract, they decreased over the lifetime of the contract. It was our expectation that during this period of time that PCTV would continue to do fundraising and through that process. And that's going to be even more important as we move into 2019. As we look at this new contract, it's important for us to note this will be an exceptionally challenging budget year for the municipality. We have a number of mandatory expenditure items that we will be having to grapple with this year. That being the case, it's important that we look closely at this contract and look what we can do to kind of manage it moving forward as we go forward. And then I guess I'd have just turn that back to the mayor.
Okay, are there any questions for Mark on this? Yeah, Ms. Carmiller?
Have you looked into what other municipalities are doing with their franchise fees? As I understand it, and I don't know when it happened, but the law changed. Do you know? I forget when. Does anybody know how many years ago that franchise fees could be used as tax relief? I know that wasn't how it was when I first started on the council. But do you know if the other municipalities, what they're doing with their franchise fees?
What I can do is just, of the ones that I do know about, I know in Ewing, they actually they administer the cable TV through their BOE. They actually take in all of their cable franchise fees for tax relief. Heightstown, they only do a community bulletin board. That is, again, it's administered through their BOE. Again, they receive those franchise fees for tax relief. Hopewell, they do have a municipal channel. What we don't know there is how much of that money is used to support that municipal channel, but they do have one. Montgomery, again, that is run in-house, and again, most of their fees are also used for tax relief. Robbinsville has no channel. They do receive cable franchise fees, take that in as tax relief. And West Windsor, they have a channel, and that's also administered through their BOE.
Yeah, Ms. Howard?
But Mark, can you say more? You mean their Board of Education?
Board of Education, I'm sorry.
And what does that mean? It's administered by their Board of Ed?
What they do is they have a shared services. In most cases, as I looked at this through the budget, it doesn't look like it's a direct exchange of monies. Basically, they provide the service as a service as part of their curriculum. They provide either the televising it, and students provide the services.
So their council meetings are
Televised in some
televised
cases.
in the same way that Board of Education meetings are. You know, I would, and I don't know, have you talked to the League of Municipalities? Because it seems to me what we want to do here is we want to see really what the standard is in other communities, because given the really tough budget that we're looking at this year, we want to make sure that we're sensitive, and so that's a really good summary of sort of the Mercer County. Do you have a broader sense, and is that worth talking to the League?
As a broader sense, just from my experience.
Yeah, across the state, yeah.
Across the state, the majority of the municipalities use it as tax relief. There may be some portion of it that is used to support the channels, but the majority of the funds are used as tax relief.
Yeah, Mr. Quinn?
I think it's worth pointing out for the public who might be watching that PCTV is not a municipal department, correct?
That is correct. It's a nonprofit.
It's a 501c3. And was there a time when PCTV was tied to the municipality? I think it's important just so that the members of the public know we provide rental space for that they rent in Monument Hall, correct?
That's correct. We provide space for them. They're a nonprofit organization. There was one point where the municipality did provide the service through municipal employees. It's now provided through them as a nonprofit organization. It is actually similar to a number of other nonprofits, and that's one of the things that council may want to think about, moving to a model that would be similar to the other nonprofits, being Sustainable Princeton and also the Senior Center, where they provide some type of service, and we do provide some revenues based on that service they provide.
That just triggered another question, was how does our Board of Ed, to be honest, I'm not a tech savvy, but how does our Board of Ed do theirs? How do they deal with their?
I don't specifically
Jim, do you
recall,
know?
but I do know that they tape it. I'm not sure if they actually pay an outside company to do it, or whether an employee does it. I'm not sure.
Jenny, do you know, or?
I'm 90% sure that they that they do it in-house. They have an employee who does it. I've also heard that students also do it.
Yeah. I just also want to say that PCTV, they do a great job also for the town of Princeton, and I think many of the residents have appreciated their services over the years. But there may be a way that they may have to start charging fees for the services that they offer just the simple resident in order to build their budget up also. So that may be something that they could do to help out to sustain them if we keep reducing what's allotted to them.
It's one you see if you look at the last contract. One of the things that we tried to also promote was not only fundraising but also charging additional fees.
Are there any other questions from council? All right. I would also like to just echo what Mr. Liverman said, is that I think we're lucky to have a public TV station in town, and we definitely appreciate the work that PCTV does. And I think it's just one of the many difficult decisions council's going to have to be grappling with as we head into the next year. We are sort of in ongoing negotiations, so I think we probably won't have a report back until we're further along with those.
That's correct.
But thank you for the report. Next we come to an update on potential future plan to transfer smart card balances after April 30th, 2019. And Mark, are you giving this report, or Deanna, are you giving this? Who's giving this report? Ms. Stockton, you get the, you get the. I would just like to also clarify before turning it over to Deanna. Sometimes council makes a decision and it's the wrong decision, and we reverse course. So that is what happened with this, and I just want to put it out there really clearly. I think at one point we said we weren't going to refund the smart card balances. That went out, and it was correctly reported, but then we changed course pretty quickly after that when we heard the feedback from the community. And I don't think that word has fully gotten out, that we are working on a plan to transfer the balances. So, I think it's, hopefully I'm correctly speaking for all of us, is that, we want a system that works. We want something that's fair to all the people who bought smart cards and also responsible to the town. So that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Stockton.
Thank you, Mayor. So included in the agenda packet, and actually I think as part of some social media posts today, we've put together this smart card transfer plan. It is, right now what you have before you is really a general overview, and more of the details will be developed next year as we get closer to that April 30th deadline. But we are still encouraging smart card users to spend down their balance in the Spring Street garage by April 30th. If there are balances still retained by smart card holders, we will be allowing a transfer of the balance to the Park Princeton mobile app. Because when the smart cards were purchased, there is a 10% bonus that was given towards parking. That amount will not be transferred, that 10% bonus, and there may also be an administrative fee that is deducted out of that transfer balance as well. So we'll be working on more details about that. This process is a manual process to transfer balances. So card holders will have to present their card for the balances to be read and then to be put into a wallet on the Park Princeton app. So like I said, as we get closer to April next year, we'll be putting more details out for everyone. Just keep an eye on social media and the municipal website. That's where the information will be posted. We'll also work with our local newspapers, our Town Topics and Princeton Packet to get the information out through those media outlets as well.
And are we working with CFAC on figuring out, just developing a model so that we're making sure that we're charging the right amount for those transfer costs so that the municipality doesn't take so much of a financial hit that we have to go to taxpayers to fill the gap?
Yes,
we
will
don't want to be doing
definitely do
that. Okay,
Yes.
great. Are there any other questions for Ms. Stockton? Yeah, Ms. Rivera?
I do have a question. I know the question has come up about the convenience fee that is used, and the question specifically was if someone wanted to add time to the meter, and they may be charged again another convenience fee.
No, that's not correct. You're only charged another convenience fee if you started an entirely new parking session. But if you're adding time because you still have an allowance within that time limit area, then you do not get an additional convenience fee on that.
So that was a misunderstanding then.
Yes.
And as far as, I thought there was a difference if someone were to use the wallet option?
No, every parking session using the app has the 35-cent convenience fee
Each time? Okay.
each time.
All right. Thank you for clarifying.
Ms.
Could I
Rivera?
actually just ask a follow-up to Leticia's about if you extend your session? I guess the question I have is if you neglect to extend your session until your time has actually expired, that would be a new session, correct?
Correct.
So that may be the discrepancy between what people are experiencing or hearing and what the reality is. So they need to be careful to extend their time before it runs out.
I have just a question about the data being collected and when it makes sense to start looking at that. I know we said we want to take a really deep look at it in 6 months, but my sense is there's probably going to be an appetite to see some of the data ahead of time, especially in terms of are the new rates and is the new system working to meet the goals we set out, which have to do with, is it 85% occupancy? Are we seeing more people use the garage for longer term parking? That sort of thing. So I assume we're collecting a lot of that data at this point. Does it make sense to look at it January 1st, or when do you think we can draw some real lessons? Because I know people take a while to figure out the new system. And
I was going to add, we've been getting weekly reports, and just looking at the reports that I see now, I think we want to give it just a little bit more time. I'm not, just by looking at the data, it does look like we're still in that phase where it's kind of not really there yet. I think probably maybe February would probably be the best time where you could really have some good data, because I've just looked at it and just looking at it on a weekly basis, I'm not sure if it's right for making any kind of assumptions on the data.
okay. Okay, well, if we can pencil that in for maybe a February check-in with a report of what the usage has been, and if we're hitting the marks that we're hoping to in terms of having more usage of spots further out, higher turnover in the central business district, more use of the parking garage for longer term parking. Are there any other questions from Ms. Stockton on this one? Okay. Yeah, thank you. All right, now we'll move on to council reports, and I'll start again on my right with Mr. Cohen.
I don't have anything tonight.
No, Ms. Howard?
I do, thank you. If you'll indulge me. First is the really exciting news that many of you may have seen in the paper, that the Princeton Department of Health received national accreditation. This is really a recognition of the high level of service that our small but mighty department provides. Accreditation by the Public Health Accreditation Board is supported by the CDC and the Robert Johnson Foundation, and it sets standards there for the more than 3,000 public health departments across the country. New Jersey, Princeton is only the third health department in New Jersey to receive this honor. So it's really a testament to our superstar health officer, Jeff Grosser, the tremendous staff in the department, and the dedicated Board of Health. And it's really exciting because it's the results of a rigorous review of internal processes, and means that the Department of Health is even better prepared to be responsive to our residents' needs and to promote a healthy community. So kudos to the Department of Health. On the second front, just wanted to comment on two things that have happened in the law enforcement arena that I know have been on the minds of a lot of people. Two important developments. First, last week, New Jersey media organization released a trove of data on police use of force across the state. And that transparency is very helpful to ensuring that police departments are accountable to the public they serve. But as you all know, we actually have been making this data public over the last several years, and the chief has a rigorous internal review process for every use of force. And of course, you know, he discusses these often at our own public meetings. So this data is rightly getting a lot of attention across the state, and I'm certain Chief Sutter, next time he's here, will be happy to discuss it further. But I think it's a reminder of the importance of the review we've been doing of this data and how seriously we've taken it. The second item is last week, the New Jersey Attorney General issued a directive regulating local law enforcement interaction with federal immigration officials. And we've discussed it at Public Safety, and we know the chief is awaiting direction from our county prosecutor, but all of our initial take is that the new directive is largely consistent with our current practices. For me, and I know for my colleagues on Public Safety, it's exciting to see this new approach, which recognizes that promoting welcoming communities is not only the right thing to do, but also, in fact, critical to effective law enforcement. Notably, the directive also incorporates training for law enforcement, which is something we have done and will continue to do. So when this new directive goes into effect, which is next March 15th, the chief will be updating his internal directive to align with it. But we don't anticipate any dramatic impact on the activities of our police department. But I'll end by noting that, unfortunately, while we may welcome this new directive, federal immigration officials have not reacted so positively. And just today, ICE is threatening to step up immigration raids in New Jersey. So unfortunately, this is not the last word on the topic, and it's just a reminder about how vigilant we're going to have to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gramella? Ms. Quinn? Ms. Raga? Okay, I have a few reports. The first is I see Mark Frieda out in the audience there, so I want to say congratulations to PFARS for their groundbreaking the other day. You probably noticed increased construction over in the corner there. So we're looking forward to having you as our new neighbor soon. There was a meeting last week with the Mercer County, members from the Mercer County Board of Elections, including Joanne Palmucci. Even Dwayne were there. Some of the school board candidates were there, and this was to discuss what happened at our last election here in Princeton, where there were 4 districts where the provisional ballots weren't counted because of problems with the bags. It's definitely a distressing situation. One of the things we heard from Joanne and her coworkers is that they have a very difficult time recruiting board workers. So I told her that we would do our best to get the word out. I think we're too late for the December election, although that one should be easier because I think we're one of the few elections. But certainly for upcoming elections, they need help getting good people to do that. And I think we also made the case that they probably needed to reinvest in some new bags because it might not have, I mean, from looking at the bags, it might not have been the board workers' fault. It could have been an old faulty lock, which is, in whatever the case may be, it's a bad situation that should never happen again. And I also had a meeting at Assemblyman Dan Benson's office. Dan was here when we had representatives from New Jersey Transit talk to us about the dinky. And Assemblyman Benson is the chair of the Assembly Transportation Committee. So he called a meeting with Kevin Corbett, who's the head of New Jersey Transit, some other New Jersey Transit officials, our Assemblyman, Roy Fryman, and myself. And we asked New Jersey Transit at that meeting, told them about the problems that the dinky closure has been causing in Princeton, and especially for our commuters. And ask them to reinstate service immediately, and if not immediately, then as soon as possible, certainly before when they were planning to resume it. They basically said that's not possible because of labor contracts they've entered into, and some other reasons. So then we talked to them about some of the more specific complaints we've heard about some of the bus service and ways to improve that for commuters. They were more amenable to making changes to the bus service. So one thing they've started doing is commuters can sit on the bus like they could on the dinky, even before the bus has left. So especially when it's cold outside, instead of standing there for 10 minutes outside the bus is going to let them sit on the bus. They also said that they would instruct the drivers to wait for the train, because sometimes when the train is late, we asked for the bus to run on a schedule, but really what you want is for the bus to meet the train. So there's been some additional feedback. They said they would do that. There's been some additional feedback in terms of some of that word not getting to every single bus driver.
Well, Mayor, that issue came up when they were here, and they were sort of adamant that they couldn't do that. So what have we learned? You need to get a legislator, the chairman of the committee, involved?
That helps. And they also have a bus that is they said about 10 minutes away, that I think is there not just to serve the dinky route, but to serve multiple routes in case there's a problem. So they have some flexibility, in times when it's extra crowded, they can send another bus over. But, when we've met, I've continued to push to them that it's having a dedicated right-of-way, you can't replace that with a bus on a crowded, congested road. I do think that they understand the situation, and they have major problems system-wide that I think we're all sympathetic to. But it's not fair and it's not right that the dinky is being made to sacrifice for the rest of the network. So anyway, the good news is that it appears that while they can't make any promises, that they've been making steady progress on installing the positive train control, and that the hope is that in the next couple weeks they'll be ready to make an announcement about when they can bring the dinky service back online. So things are moving, at least they seem to be. And let's see, there was a meeting of the Economic Development Committee last week, and we had a special guest from Jersey City. Brian Platt came. He's the business administrator, and he used to be the former economic development director there. And he had some just interesting information to share about some of their experiences. They have a pedestrian mall where they closed one of their streets. They have parking problems just like we do. And they have 7 improvement districts. And so he talked about, how it's like to administer those. And I thought there was some interesting information there that I think the group needs to meet and still process. And lastly, I was asked to sign a letter to the governor that the RPA is organizing. It's the Regional Plan Association, and it's about the state plan. So this was something that was talked about a lot about a decade ago and has wasn't talked about very much during Governor Christie's era. And so the letter is to convince the governor to fill the vacant seats on the State Planning Commission. The current New Jersey State Plan was written in 2001 and hasn't been updated since then. So then the other request in the letter is to update the State Development and Redevelopment Plan and to reconstitute the Office of State Planning. And the goal for this new state plan would be to have the state better address issues of equity, of climate change, and also infrastructure. So it seemed like something that Princeton would support, but given we're meeting tonight, just wanted to take the temperature of my colleagues before signing my name to this. So, okay, great.
Yep.
And I can send a copy of the letter around too, so people see it.
I do wonder a little bit, because we have such home rule in New Jersey, how they can really do anything.
I did ask that, so it's not binding, but I think it helps. The way it was explained to me is it helps even just the state agencies coordinate with one another. And these all seem like really important issues that having state leadership on, I think, helps with planning. The state plan right now, if you remember, basically divides the state up into areas of growth and areas for preservation. And I don't think they want to go back and try to redo that. I think basically those areas are pretty similar to what they were before, but it's more taking it to the next level.
'Cause I think we're an area of growth.
I think it depends of where we are in town, but yeah. Are there any staff reports? Ms. Stockton?
Cherry Valley Road construction began today, the municipal project, which provides for the widening and improvement of Cherry Valley from about 300 feet west of Cherry Hill to the Mercer County Bridge at Jefferson's Curve. The first phase of the work has Cherry Valley Road closed from the east side of the southern leg of Cherry Hill Road to the Mercer County Bridge. It's a little bit different from the way we had set it up in our discussions with the contractor at pre-construction, but they have closed off that section of road. It's closed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The only traffic allowed into that area are residents and their services. Unfortunately, today with the start of that closure, we also had a motor vehicle crash on 206 between Herrontown Road and Ewing. So there was quite a bit of congestion and traffic problems this morning, unfortunately. But we are moving ahead with construction for as long as the weather permits into the winter season. Also on the Mercer County project on Cherry Valley Road, if you recall, they're replacing a bridge between Province Line and Great Road. That work is proceeding very nicely, and while the road is not scheduled to be open until the end of January, my fingers are crossed looking at how much progress they've made. They'll be opening that roadway sooner than expected. That's not official word from Mercer County, but it does look like they are proceeding, and that work will be completed soon. Okay.
Great, thank you. Any other staff reports? Okay. Then we're going to move on. Actually, there's a item on a work session for tonight that we're going to hold so that the chair of the committee can be here. But if council wants to read the draft that was sent out, if people have comments on that, they can get them to Leticia in the meantime, and maybe those can be woven in before it's presented back to council. So next we come to our first resolution. 18379, resolution appointing Dolores A. Williams as municipal clerk. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. I'm going to give it to, moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Ms. Howard. Any discussion?
Congratulations.
Yeah,
We're really excited for this
I
one.
think everyone is really happy and excited about and thankful that such a competent person was waiting in the wings.
Yeah. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Congratulations. And hopefully not condolences. Okay. Next is 18380, resolution authorizing a memorandum of understanding with Princeton Community Housing and the Princeton Housing Authority for the Franklin Avenue parking lot, Maple Terrace redevelopment. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Quinn and seconded by Ms. Fraga. Question for Ms. Krummeller?
Yeah, I'm really sorry because I should have mentioned this before right now, but I'm a little bit concerned that I mean, I wish that Princeton was involved in the study rather than just PHA and Princeton Community Housing, and I was just wondering if we could add in on number 2 that Princeton will be involved in those decisions, since it's, I think in the long run it would be better for Princeton to be involved, because we're in number 2 it says that PHA and PCHDC will, and it says determine the steps, but it also says develop preliminary project plans and hire professionals.
Sorry. Actually, what's happening here is they're developing it, but if you look on, and I don't know the section off the top of my head, and I can look for it in a minute, there is a section which calls for the municipality has the ability to review and and with all reasonableness, either say that whatever they propose is acceptable or not. So there is a portion.
Right,
Yeah,
I
number
saw
6,
that,
I
but
see that, yeah.
I feel like Franklin, Franklin Road is just such a central area that rather than, that we should be in there in the beginning.
I just see this differently. It's not necessarily, this is really who's going to be responsible for the work. The municipality will be involved in this whole process. What will happen is PCH and the Housing Authority will be kind of primarily responsible, like in any agreement, there's a lead agency. The way I read this is more that they're the lead agency. We will all be involved in this process as we move forward, and we'll have say on the final product.
If it helps, take a look at paragraph 6 in the agreement, because even before you get to the development plans, Princeton has to sign off on the study.
No, I understand that Princeton has to sign off on the study, but for instance, hiring the development professionals seems like a decision that it would be better if Princeton was part of, rather than being forced to either say yes or no to something that's.
But I mean, I think that what we did was, when going over this, is to have it so that the 3 parties will be working together. So I think that you can rest assured that they will be working together. I don't think that Mark wanted the total responsibility for us to take this on as a sole project, and that's why it was developed this way. But we did have oversight. I mean, if there's, how much did you want from us? Because I know that our engineering will be working with them also, I'm sure, on many issues. How much did you want?
Well, I feel like since in the end it's going to be better for everyone if we are just as invested as everyone. So I think we need to be involved. I mean, it seemed like a lot of the language is the 2 entities are making these decisions that and then, for instance, in number 2, in the study, PHA and PCHDC will determine and implement a list of steps. And I don't know, I would like to just put Princeton in there.
I'm not sure.
Go ahead. Go ahead, and I'll finish after you speak.
I mean, I'm a little agnostic in terms of actually modifying the agreement, but I really want to support Jenny's point in the sense that we have a lot of track record as a town of dealing with citizen concerns, with development projects. I'm not sure that either of the entities that are the prime responsible parties in this agreement have that, and I think they would be well served by tapping into the wealth of institutional memory about how other projects have gone in terms of getting community input. I mean, that's the thing I'm really concerned about, is getting early community input to let that help shape the plans. And there's nothing in this agreement that even, alludes to that.
David, that is exactly my concern, because I feel we do have a unique opportunity in this, that we have no excuse. In the planning board, we constantly, we feel we don't have power, and we say, well, they're allowed to do this, they're allowed to do that. And in this case, I feel like we are just as we're going to be responsible for the project.
And by the way, there's already a group of neighbors that are actively working on this. I mean, I have heard through the grapevine.
Yes.
So,
What my suggestion would be, at this point, this is, I think everything that people are saying here is what is intended by this agreement. There seems to not be a comfort level at this point. My suggestion is that we pull this, find out that comfort level before we move forward, because I have some concerns about making changes to it as we sit here this evening. So if we're uncomfortable with it, let's pull it, hear what your concerns are tonight. We can go back and make some adjustments to try to deal with it. But I think the intent, everything that everyone is saying there, is the intent of this agreement. It seems as though, just as you're reading this, I think one of the reasons is we initially drafted it, so it's really about the other agencies more than it is about us. And we could probably rewrite this just to make it kind of deal with some of the issues you're talking about.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and
don't-
I will apologize for not bringing up my concerns earlier.
I just want to say that I don't think that I have a discomfort level, and maybe because I've been involved from the beginning. I clearly understand what is happening. I know these agencies will be dealing with the community. They will be dealing with the neighborhood. Whenever we get into affordable housing, I hate to say it in Princeton, I hear the same thing what I'm hearing now, and it's this, oh no, wait, hold back, and it kind of scares me, because I don't know why anyone would think that these two agencies that have been here for years and years wouldn't work with the community, and I don't know why anybody would think that these agencies that have been here for years and years wouldn't do the right thing when it comes to doing these studies. So, I mean, I don't know where this is coming from, but I do feel that this is like a kind of, for me, it seems like it's an unfounded fear, and I don't want to send an unfounded fear message out to this community at this point, especially dealing with affordable housing. And this is what this sounds like, and I know you don't mean it this way, Jenny, but this is how it sounds to me, like an uncomfort and a fear. And this is what the neighborhood, this is what we have to stop letting this block us from doing anything. This is not saying that there's no community input. This is not saying that there's any study that's going to take place that we're not going to have to okay. It doesn't say that at all. And this is what I'm hearing up here. So I don't know where this is coming from, who's been buzzing in people's ears. I don't know, but this is not what I would like to say.
So Lance, no one has talked to me at all about this, and it was just when I was reading it, and the reason, my concern is the opposite of what you're saying. It's because I think things like this, as we all know, can come back and haunt you if someone can, come in and look at the language really carefully, or what, and I just feel like if we have everything spelled out as as closely as possible, we have a better foundation going forward, and that's my motivation, to make sure, like right now, especially after having this conversation, we could very well have people come in and say, look, Princeton's not listed in number 2 or 3 or 4. And it's not going to help. I mean,
Yeah, I know, but
it's starting off on the wrong foot.
Yeah, but this cannot take place unless you say yes. And so I don't see where you see anything else other. This cannot take place unless you say yes, Jenny. So where do you see us not being involved?
It's about it's about the process, Lance. It's not about the result. It's about the process.
Okay.
I think it's also important that we understand what this document is and what it is not. It is not the final document that really, that we will move forward with. This provides just a framework for the three entities to work together to come to a lot of the issues that we're talking about here. I want to be clear on what you're looking in terms of specifics that would be added, because I think there are more than what is necessary at this time for this MOU, because it just lays out what the relationships will be moving forward in the broad terms.
Just for my edification, can you talk about from this MOU to the project completion? Like what are some of the big major milestone steps in that?
What will happen, what this agreement will provide for is one, which is the study. And the study is just a feasibility study determined to make sure, are there any environmental issues on the property? Are we able to generally site, build on the property what we're expecting to build? What the financing would be for the project. And then there's a phase two, which is the development plan, which will go into more detail, very specific detail about the specific issues of the site and what the site will look like, the number of units, the plan itself. At each stage, we have the ability to say yes or no at each stage of that process. What this does, it says one agency, we're going to give you, we all agree, we're giving one of the agencies the lead in order to begin this process, do the feasibility study, begin, manage who will be kind of the professionals in doing the environmental studies, the initial drawings. But again, we will all have input in the process as we move along.
You know, I'll just add that I would be worried about us losing momentum on an exciting project, and especially losing Lance. So if we don't approve this tonight, I would, you know, I'm prepared to support it as is at the next meeting, just to make sure we're continuing to make progress for, you know, while we have somebody who's been so involved, deeply involved in these issues and brings such expertise. So if we don't have any, you know, I mean, or we can move tonight, but I wouldn't want to delay further than that.
Mr. Quinn?
I just, if Trishka could explain the item number 14 about what happens if one party decides that they can't do it. It was confusing to me. I support moving forward with this, and I also had a question about, obviously, Franklin and Maple have been on site since the 30s, and I don't know how long the parking lot's been there, but this MOU says the municipality is going to be responsible for any environmental cleanup on the site, and that it seems kind of not knowing the history of the site, it seems like it could be very expensive, and
We're the owner. Owner pays for environmental cleanup.
so anyway, 14 would be is the main thing.
Yeah, that's really, I think, just talking about if one of the three parties withdraws, basically what the other two parties have the right to do, and it includes a one-year right of first refusal. I would agree with you. The wording is a bit convoluted, and I've read it and I've reread it, but I mean, basically, it's boiling down to a right of first refusal that's accorded to.
So it allows the
Yeah,
two
Marcia.
parties, if one party backs out, it allows the two parties to go forward. And where does right of first refusal come in?
What it actually does is it allows for if the project, if this contract terminates, one of the parties. Sorry, thank you. If this contract terminates.
Is there a mic in the audience?
Mike, I said Mike.
Sorry, go ahead.
One of the parties will have 1 year to actually, if they want to move forward with the development alone, they could do so. But it also provides a second piece that the municipality, at its sole discretion, can determine whether they can actually financially, administratively actually do the project. And it just allows for If the whole agreement terminates, that one party can say, I am still interested. They have up to a year to say that they're interested. And then they'd have to demonstrate to us that they have the ability to actually do the project.
Thank you, that makes sense. And again, I read it a couple times and really couldn't get to what it was saying, but it does make sense now that you've explained it to me.
I just wanted to add to that. I have no concerns with moving forward. I trust that these organizations have been working on this for a while, and I just want to see it go forward if possible soon.
So I'm going to, with 2 words, explain my concerns about relying on a right of refusal, which is essentially what we have here. And the 2 words are school referendum.
Can you say
I don't
three-
know
can you
what
say
you,
three words?
I just was trying to
Can
give
you say 3
perplex
words?
us
Would you
all.
mind saying
Maybe
three?
give
I
us
need
more
it.
than 2 words
I
on
need
that.
I
The
need it.
schools prepared a series of plans without community input, and they got turned down.
Not yet.
Yet. I mean, the referendum got pulled.
Well, I think what we're saying here is, and I just want to be extremely careful. I believe that Shirley Bishop, she looked over. Did she review this, Shirley?
Actually, Ed Schmier prepared the agreement.
Ed Schmier. But this.
She had some input in
Yeah, but
terms of
she had some. All of our housing experts that we have been dealing with had input into how this was put together, for that reason. And I don't think anyone ever said, and this is where I'm trying to get at. Did you want to put in this? And I need to hear directly that the community will have the overall say on this plan, or did you want to put?
I think that I really want to let Jenny respond to that, because I think I've been clear about what my concerns are, that using the wrong process can lead to a very bad result. And I started out saying I'm agnostic about whether to change this agreement or not, but I'm trying to be super forceful about advising that the agencies who are going to be working on putting this plan together should learn the lessons that Princeton has to offer, from Avalon Bay to the school referendum to, every project where we didn't get the right kind of input from the community before the design was done.
Well, there was one meeting where we had Councilwoman Quimler came to in regard to a possible housing on Franklin, and she had asked a host of questions, and we tried to answer those questions as best as possible. But one thing that I think that she left with was a clear understanding that the Housing Authority, their first objective, along with Princeton Community Housing, would be, and this has been, and every time we've ever discussed this, would be to talk and work with the community, to talk and work with the neighbors. No one would ever go here and try to establish a project like this without even including the neighbors. That's why I don't know where this is coming from, because this is the biggest thing, the biggest challenge that they're going to do is work with the neighbors. There's small groups now meeting with neighbors in regard to this. I mean, I don't know why we would think this wouldn't be done. And we have learned, as David said, we have learned from the school referendum, and we have learned from past history, that if you don't work the neighbors, you're just going to go downhill. Half the things I vote on up here, and we vote on, and we've worked with the neighbors. People have worked with the neighbors, and I don't know why all of a sudden with this one, somebody's assuming that we're not going to work with the neighbors. We're going to work with the neighbors even more with this.
But Lance, then why
last
do you
one-
object to just adding Princeton in? I mean, I'm just talking about
I
number
don't. I don't object to adding
I
Princeton.
mean, number
in. I just-
two.
if you want to add
it's
Princeton
not.
in-
It's just. It's really a legal thing. I totally trust you, but it says here, in the study, PHA and PCHDC will blah blah blah, blah blah blah. C, develop preliminary project plans. And I think that is what I just feel
I don't
like
mind adding Princeton. I don't mind. I don't object to adding
so
Princeton.
it just from the very beginning
my-
start
I have
out.
one
We should Bring
suggestion.
it back to the next meeting if we're going to make a change. That's my only suggestion, if we make a change, because there was a lot of work in kind of negotiating, there's 3 parties involved here.
Okay.
If we were to make a change, I would suggest that you let me know what the change is, and let's bring it back to all the parties involved before we move forward with a decision on any change.
Okay, well, I will suggest the change, and that is just adding the name Princeton in number 2. in the study, Princeton, PHA, and PCHDC will, blah, 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 blah.
But do we want to be, I mean, I guess my question back would be, does Princeton want to be assuming responsibility for doing those lists of things? And my recommendation might just be throwing something like in consultation with, and I don't even know if we want to be consulted for all of those steps, or maybe it's just for the reason why I asked my question is because I think people are getting hung up on what it means to develop preliminary project plans. And could you define what a preliminary project plan is? Because is that the plan for the development? Because it seems to be saying here that that the study is informing what then that work is. The project plan might just be planning for the environmental review and planning for the funding and planning for some of the other things that allow the project to go forward. And
I was going to read this again while you're...
I think that's the sticking point, and I just feel like people have different concepts in their head as to what that means.
I think you're right, because when I was first reading it, the thing is, it is kind of complicated. And so when you're reading it, you can...
For the project plan really talks about scheduling, financing.
Right.
The administration is very technical and preliminary. It's not the actual...
It's a
site.
plan. It's a plan for the development project, not a plan for the
Correct.
building.
Correct.
And if you read it in the context, this whole thing is just how do you put the funding together? How do you make sure that the site is going to be ready
Right.
to build on? All of that. And it's the first step to what's referred to in a later number about
Right.
then this is the basis for then moving on and talking about the project where then you really need to have serious neighborhood and community input, because in truth, the neighbors aren't, there might be some neighbors, because we live in Princeton, who could help us with the financing and have input into that piece of it, or have input into like the environmental review. But really, most neighbors are going to be concerned about the mass of the building, what it's going to look like, what the impact is, that sort of
This
thing.
is very similar to what we did with PCV, where they really did the preliminary work of the financing in those pieces.
Maybe if we just change the word, or change the word around, like develop preliminary plans for the project implementation. Number 2, is that right? Yeah, not 2C. Develop preliminary plans for the project implementation. Right, because that's what you're talking about.
Isn't that what that says, or is it just me?
Well, the thing is, you could read it either way. You could say,
I think it's the word plans that are confusing, because another definition for plans are like architectural plans.
Just take out the word
We can
plans.
take out plans.
Just delete plans, and then it'll read develop
Take out plans.
preliminary project parameters and a financial pro forma.
that's
So-
perfect.
We can take
But
out plans.
we're going to be asking 2 other parties to sign this. Shouldn't we make sure they're okay with that?
If we take out plans. If we take out plans.
It doesn't change, I mean, it just clarifies. It really doesn't change anything unless they wanted to develop.
Yep.
Develop preliminary project parameters and financial pro forma, implementation schedule, funding, and appropriate administration mechanisms.
Yeah.
That's the study, but this MOA also includes the development plan, which is under item 7, which includes, sorry, my screen just flipped, but it includes detailed engineering plans and other drawings. That is part of this MOA. This phase 2, as Mark was explaining when he described it before, is being broken down into 2 phases. This does include preparation of design drawings.
Information is appropriately going to be.
I just feel like out of respect for our important community partners, we need to give them a chance. to either weigh in here or review? Yeah, it's-
Yeah, I mean, I guess, do you want another 2 weeks to review this, or is that, is time of the essence?
But I
or-
don't, I just want to say, I just want to be clear. I don't know if it's just for them to review unless they know what we're asking for them to do, because it wouldn't make any sense for them to go and meet and review something that they don't know what we want them to change. I mean, that's not
You mean,
fair.
you mean, are we fundamentally changing the nature of
Yeah,
this?
yeah, what are we,
or is
what,
this-
yeah, we need to let them know what we're changing, if that's the case.
Well, maybe we could ask to hear from them on what plan, you know, more generally, on the concerns that have been raised.
But David, can you just tell me which one you
Seven?
would?
Wait, hold on, we just need like one person at a time, so I just want to defer to Mark first, and then Jenny.
The real question that Lance asked are what are the general concerns with the agreement, and then let us go back and we can talk to them to make any adjustments if there are concerns that people still think we need to go back and look at. So that's the question. What are the general concerns? We're now dealing with the development plan. What are the concerns about the development plan as written?
I can try to re-articulate what I've heard from Ms. Crummel or Mr. Cohen to answer that. If this is, and hopefully I can get this right, is that there's concerns that there's no specific language in here about I mean, there's some language in here, but they
Consensus
want
building
additional.
process.
They want some more language in here about a community process that has the involvement of the municipality as part of it? What are you asking for?
Well, mine's a little even less than David. Here's the issue. I have people call me up and say, you should do this or that on the Franklin Road lot. And then I say, oh, I'm not involved. I mean, that's how it feels as written. And it's not that I love this project and I'm excited about it and I think it's going to be great and we're all going to be really proud of it. It's not, I just don't want, I'm sorry if it sounds that I'm somehow opposing it. I'm just saying that's my, it seems like we're handing it off, even just the council, not even the community. Because we're not, you know, it is easier to do it that way, but I think in the end, even if the council itself, like a couple members are Princeton, is involved, not just the other two agencies, it seems like a better idea.
Mr. Quinn, and then
Wouldn't this go before the zoning or planning board, depending on what approval is needed? There'd be at least a courtesy review at the planning board, correct?
I think it would be more than a courtesy review. I think it's going to be
Right.
full application. That's not spelled out in here, nor would it be. And before it ever gets to that stage, Princeton has to approve the plans
Yeah.
that get developed.
Again,
There's
my
no
only,
ability to file anything without Princeton sign-off.
So,
My
but
only
if we're one of the people on this, then does it go through that process? Or how does that work if the,
Again, this is an agreement that talks about how we're going to get from where we are sitting here today to point A. It's not, so no, this agreement doesn't speak to who would be on the application. What it does speak to is there's going to be an entity formed specifically for the purpose of bringing this project forward, applying for the approvals, so it wouldn't be Princeton making the application. What this really talks about is how to even get to that stage in the first place, because there are so many steps in between. But what I will say this evening is I really have to caution you against doing any rewriting of this agreement on the fly. So here is my request. Either approve it tonight as written, or if changes need to be made to address the concerns that have been raised here this evening, then we'll bring it back to you in 2 weeks. But I really don't want to get into making any changes to the document tonight.
the other proposal I might make to my colleagues is if we can articulate what sort of process you had in mind, and I think we're all people of goodwill here, that I think if we had a verbal commitment to have whatever meetings or whatever things that you had in mind, that we could get that verbal commitment if it's amenable, and then we can go ahead and pass the resolution.
Yeah.
But with that
And I-
small change that Mark outlined of taking out the word plans. But I think that's, I agree
Oh,
with
but
you, I will do that.
The plans are part of this agreement later on in the agreement.
Yeah.
On page 6, item 7B, it's in there. So taking it out of item 2 isn't going to help anything. I have two things I want to say. One is that I appreciate the issue, the problem of actually putting Princeton, the municipality, into this agreement as a responsible party, because I think that's not necessarily what we want to do. I think I would actually be okay with passing this resolution the way it's written right now. But I think that the kind of process that we're talking about, you know, doesn't it just involve meetings with the community groups? I think that what we've seen from working with LRK, with Jim Constantine on the seminary redevelopment project, is that really what you want is professionals who have experience with consensus building in a design process, which is a specialized thing. There are a lot of designers out there in the world who only work with, you know, private clients who have ultimate decision-making powers, and they don't develop the skills that are needed to work with community groups. And I would hate to throw Leighton to the wolves and ask him to lead those design meetings, right? So it's both about having a consensus building process with the community, but also getting the right professionals on board when they're choosing their design team.
Mr.
Well,
Rowe?
I feel like even if, and it doesn't have to be me, but if a member of the council or two could be on a committee that would be working with them and keeping, so we could all tell each other, so we could report on it and tell the council what's going on. And we can, I agree with what David said, although I think that's expensive to hire those kinds of people.
It doesn't have to be LRK. I mean, there are other.
Or could we have them maybe prepare a report every 2 months or every month or something, a report of what's going on, Jenny? I'm just saying if for feedback. Or if someone would like to, I'm sure there's no, I'm just speaking for myself, I'm sure there wouldn't be an objection for someone to sit on the committee and work with them. I'm sure there wouldn't be any objection at all.
That'd be great. And I think that kind of assurance is what, that would be fine with me.
Okay, so I think
Maybe a
the-
retiring council member might be, who is trusted and respected by all sides in this, might
All right,
be
I just
able
wanted,
to.
I wanted to see if Mark has. Oh, I'm trying to read. Okay, so we were going to see if we could just have a verbal agreement from the other two parties about some of these suggestions for the process. So leave the MOU wording exactly as it is, but before we vote on it, and it's like, if people don't want to be put on the spot too, I totally understand. I'm just trying to figure out a way if we can try to keep this moving tonight. So I would ask, I mean, I'm sure you guys have sort of talked about what some of this process would look like anyway. So maybe if I can invite Ed up and Leighton up to talk about sort of what, or Alvin? Is Alvin in the hot seat for this one? Okay. If you could just respond to what you've been hearing, especially in terms of process and what you've been thinking about in terms of community engagement and council engagement through the development process.
Both of those things, Ahmed Truselli with Princeton Community Housing, both of those forms of engagement are fundamental. We can't do this, I think we would agree, without that kind of involvement of the community and the municipality. It just won't work. It's impossible. And you know, you mentioned, David, you mentioned consensus building. That is, again, a fundamental piece of what we have to do. And yes, we have to have the right professionals to help us do that. So all the things that you're talking about are certainly realistic and reasonable. I don't think we have an objection to that. And it's all, been part of our conversations to this point, that we all understand this is a greater community, that we have to build that consensus in to achieve this goal. So while it may not be explicitly stated, it's always been sort of part of the conversation. So again, I don't think we have a problem with it. I just will say on behalf of my organization, I think I can agree to a verbal commitment on some of these things, but I do have to say it's subject to my board's approval, because I can't speak for my board until I talk to them about it. So, and we do have a meeting tomorrow night, so I could get an answer pretty quickly. Do you want to add anything?
No, as we're concerned with the PHA board too. So to comment tonight on what you're saying is, I can't. I also would, the only other concern that I have is, please don't forget, Princeton's not doing this just out of the goodness of their heart, okay? You have a court, you're going to sign off on a document, and that document you've already printed on the website how many units are going to be there. So and if you sign off on it, then you're going to have to follow through on it. I don't say to say that's a threat, but there's that other thing that's whirling around here that you're going to have to deal with too. So, with that, no more comments.
Yeah, I think it's less community input as to like if we should be building it. It's more of a how. And so, I think everybody wants this to be a successful project, and I think a part of a successful project is that everybody looks at it. The people who live there look at it and are happy. People who are neighbors look at it and are happy, and the larger community is proud to have it there. And so, I think it's just how do we get from here to there? And I just hoping we can just get some reassurance that
Yes.
you're not going to go off with your ball and go play with it, and then we're like, what? So,
No. Again,
you don't want to
just
see
that
the
it's-
four-story high-rise with the, no.
No,
No.
Okay.
Yeah, again, that has never been an intention, and again, it has to be a community effort, and this is not just, not just saying it for the sake of saying it. It really has to happen that way, or else it probably won't happen.
Right. Okay. Okay. Are there any questions for?
Thank you.
No. Okay.
I make a motion that,
Second.
I think it's,
It already has been.
Moved. Okay. So, are people ready to take a vote on it at this point? Okay.
Yes.
Do you want a roll call vote, or should we just
We
do
just all in
affirmation?
favor.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The resolution passes unanimously,
thank you, guys.
and we look forward to working with you all on this project. All right.
Due diligence did not mean lack of enthusiasm in this case.
Okay. Next is 18381, resolution authorizing the closure of the eastbound lanes on Terhune Road between US Route 206 and Mount Lucas Road for use as a construction staging area by the Princeton First Aid and Rescue Squad site construction. And now remembering why Mark is here. Like,
Easy ones.
I'll move this.
Second,
moved by Ms. Krummeller, seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any discussion?
It just,
Yeah,
Had
Mr.
I-
Cohen?
I didn't see anything about specific timing. I'm hoping there'll be time to put out one of the electronic signs saying that the change is coming, rather than just put out the sign that says, one day you can't use this. So,
Yes, we will work together with Princeton Fire and Rescue once the permit is received from DOT to make sure there's adequate notice to the public.
Okay. Are there any other questions about this resolution? All in favor?
aye.
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 Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. And next, I would recommend we take the next three resolutions in block, 18382, 18383, and 18384. And they all authorize various well, I'll just read them all. So they go on the record, resolution authorizing the purchase of an emergency lighting package from Emergency Services Systems in the amount of $21,302.80 for the Princeton Fire Department. 383 is resolution authorizing the purchase of storage lockers from AMP Business Interiors Incorporated in the amount of $14,843.20 for the Princeton Fire Department. And 18384, resolution authorizing the purchase of fire supply and attack hose from Water Supply Innovation in the amount of $38,935, also for the Princeton Fire Department.
I'll move those.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Krummeler, seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any questions or comments, Mr. Cohen?
I don't know if anybody who's here knows the answer to this, but the fire hose, the resolution about the fire hose equipment, in reading the detailed information, it sounded like this was a rolling process where first so is this just for a portion of replacing the fire hose, or is this going to, because it sounded like it's not clear how much needs to be replaced.
It's not, I'm sorry, it's just for a portion of the replacement. They'll probably do it annually. I can give you more details. I can provide council more details of what the program looks like. What we were trying to do, particularly with fire, is to get them on a schedule of a regular rotation for replacement of some of their equipment, so we don't get these big bills in one year.
Any other further questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Block passes unanimously. Are we holding this next one, 18385, Mark? For the Armored Services? We're moving forward with it. Okay. So this is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract with Eastern Armored Services Incorporated for armored car services in the not-to-exceed amount of $200,448 from January 2nd, 2019 through December 31st, 2020, with the provisions for 2 one-year extensions. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Krummeler and seconded by Ms. Howard. And David, did you just want to ask the question you had earlier for the record?
Yeah, I do. So I had raised the question, one of the hoped for results of our upgraded parking system is that there may be a decrease in the amount of coin payment that is received, and the parking consultant had represented that could actually result in some significant cost savings from a decrease in the need for armored vehicle service. And so I'd asked the question whether that was built into the contract, and I'll let Ms. Stockton answer since she was the one who responded.
The answer was yes. We worked extensively with Dixon Resources Unlimited and Lisa Maddox of Mason Griffin to put in provisions within the contract documents regarding potential changes to the scope and then related changes to the cost of the contract. And so that is built into the contract documents that the Eastern Armored had considered when they put their bid together.
Great. And so we track that, and is that something that we'd expect to come back to council and say like 6 months if we're having, you know, a big drop off in coin usage, or how should we expect to see the difference?
The coin portion of the contract is approximately $80,000 for the 2 years, and so we'll be looking at our percentage of revenue coming in from coin, just along with our monthly review of the parking performance. And so we'll be looking at that and consulting with administration and legal to determine if there is a need to revisit that part of the project.
Okay, great. Any further questions or comments on this one? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes unanimously. Now we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature passed by a single vote. I'm going to remove item 10 for the moment. Are there any other items anybody would like removed off the consent agenda? All right.
I'll
seeing none-
move then all the items except number 10.
Second.
Okay, moved by Ms. Krummeler, seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and now we come to number 10, which is a performance guarantee completion time extension to June 30th, 2019 to Shabad Lubavitch of Mercer County for 645 State Road, Block 2701, Lot 3, Major Site Plan and Conditional Use with Variances.
So moved?
Moved by
Second.
Ms. Howard, seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in
Oh,
favor?
wait, why did we take it out?
Oh.
Wait, Mr.
Oh, sorry.
I
Mr. Cohen,
I have
yes,
to
sir.
abstain from this one
Yeah,
because
so he's
they're a
re-
client, former client of mine, so.
Okay,
Okay.
so all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And
One
and
abstention.
One abstention. Okay. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.